Thanks for joining, everybody. As many of you know, my name is Savannah Bennett, and I'm a bioengineer at BIOS Lighting. So really, it can be a confusing landscape out there with so many products and so much information. It's hard to know what to trust and what not to trust. We ask ourselves questions like, how do I know that what this company says is in this product is actually in this product? So on and so forth, things like that. Well, on that note, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Tad Hussey of KiS Organics podcast. He has passionately planned a presentation today rooted in the scientific process, aiming to arm you, our viewers, with the knowledge to cut through the noise and make sound production decisions. But before I hand it over to Tad, I want you to know you're free to ask any questions in the chat section. We'll get them at the end, and you'll be queued for the Q&A. So Tad, all yours.
All right, thanks, Savannah. I appreciate the introduction. So yeah, we'll just dive right in. This is a little weird without an audience, but I'm gonna do my best. So like they said, my name is Tad Hussey. I'm the owner of KiS Organics. And I wanted to start this talk off by just telling a quick story that kind of captures a lot of how I feel around product marketing. So the year was 2007. I had just finished grad school and come back from Australia, and I started working for the family business. My parents had sold their nursery landscaping business and had started a business around compost teas. And at the time, it wasn't something I was super interested in or passionate about, but I thought the soil microbiology aspect and the microscope work would be a lot of fun. So I started diving into that further. And one of the things I found right away was that different inputs, brewing lengths, oxygen levels all affected the quality and the diversity in the tea itself. So I learned that after brewing for over 40 hours, you would end up with a tea that had very little microbial diversity in it, primarily just made up of one morphology of bacteria and one morphology of flagellate. I use the analogy of what if you just went to the zoo and opened all the doors and all the gates and gave them a bunch of food about at first you'd have this explosion of growth, but at the end of a week, all you'd probably have left is, lions and rats. And you see the same thing in compost tea. So while I was, digging into all of this research and trying to do a lot of microscope work and learn more about this, at the same time, there was this other company selling vortex brewers. And they had an ad out to garden centers that said, hey, our tea is full of all of this great diversity. You can brew it for up to a week and you can sell it, you can store it in the refrigerator and you can sell it for 1,000 times profit. So not only did I find the markup, a little bit unethical, but I had issues with this research I was seeing and, with my own eyes and from other people that were doing microscope work was completely contrary to what the claims they were making. So I reached out to the company and contacted them just to find out more and say, hey, you might want to look into this. And they basically told me because, they were using biodynamic compost and they were also using a vortex which mimicked nature, potentizes the water. Their microbes were the all-star point guards of the microbial world. And then mine were simply bench players. And it wasn't really, anything I could argue with. But it got me thinking, how much of what I saw in garden centers and how much I saw online was really just marketing hype, because up until that point, I take it all kind of for granted. So this is the slide kind of talking a little bit about what I want to talk about today. But basically, it brings me back to the first time I walked into a hydro shop. I was like, what is Cushy Kush and Rhino Skin? What are all these products? It looked nothing like the nursery and garden center that I had grown up in. There were no plants. So I started wondering, do I need 1 bottle? Do I need 10 bottles? It was just all really overwhelming. And if you ask any grower around that time, they would tell you that you have to have product X in your regimen if you wanted to grow the best, the best cannabis out there. And so as a new grower, I went and bought all of these products, and I started using them all in my grow, thinking I was, maximizing my plant growth and health. Ultimately, what I found was that I grew pretty mediocre plants at best, and it was really, really expensive. So I had this weird, juxtaposition going on in my head between what I was learning about plant and microbe interactions, and then all of these, proprietary secret sauce formulations that I was hearing about on forums and in hydro shops, and it wasn't all adding up. So, for me, the seminal moment was when I had a conversation with a gentleman named Tim Wilson of Microbe Organics. And we were talking online about compost teas and the use of humic acid in compost teas as a high carbon source and a good fungal food. And basically, Tim asked me, how do you know that what you're saying is true? And I told him, well, so-and-so, who was the, current expert in the field at the time, she had made these claims. So I had just taken them at face value. And he goes, well, you have a microscope. Why don't you test these things out? And I didn't really have any excuse. So I started looking into these things. And basically what I found was, in our cases, trying 6 different humic acid products at different concentrations, it actually suppressed microbial growth. And so the point itself was rather minor, but it got me to start thinking outside the box and stopped accepting these claims that I was finding. So fast forward to 2011, and sorry, let me figure out how to do this without the sound. 2011 comes around, and we open a farm and feed store in Redmond, Washington. So we've got chickens, ducks, goats, pigs running around. We have a community pea patch that you can see here. We have an outdoor preschool on the property. We're growing food. We're selling unique edible plants. It was a really cool experience. And while we're doing all this, we also have an organic hydro shop. And so part of my job was figuring out what products I wanted to carry in my store that I had faith in would be of high quality and would offer, my customers something that I'd be willing to put my brand behind, my name behind, and was worth the money that they would be spending in my store. So this was really where the journey really took off for me, because I had to start looking at a lot of products. So I wanted to start off today taking a look at a couple products that are made by 2 of the top, revenue companies in the industry. And I don't want to name any names, but I wanted to kind of go through the process that I went through in researching products and kind of show you how I evaluate these sorts of things. So the first product, I went to the page, and the first thing I saw was this graph that shows grower reported product X effects. And they show a 41% increase in trichome structures, increased heat resistance, mold, mite, and mildew resistance, sturdier plants, and increased value of the flowers. Those are things all sound really, really wonderful, and all things that I want, obviously, in my garden. But it doesn't tell me anything about the study itself. So I want to know the research behind this, how they came up with these numbers. So I reached out to them, and I'll show you that here in a second. They did send me their product label when I reached out to them. And this is what I was able to get off the back of the product label. So they guarantee 0.4. So we know it's 0.4% potassium silicate, or soluble potash, and 0.15% silicon dioxide. So we can see that right off the label. One thing of note is to realize that not everything that's in a product has to be on a label, only the things that they are guaranteeing in their analysis. So if it doesn't contribute to that NPK value, it doesn't necessarily have to be on the product. The other thing of note, which is a little less common but is possible, is that 0.4% could actually be a lot higher. You just have to hit the minimum threshold of what you're guaranteeing on the label. So I have heard of companies in the past, for example, claiming that they have a proprietary source of nitrogen, and so their product is better, when in fact they were just putting in a lot higher levels of nitrates than their competition. So something to be aware of there. Below that chart on the page, it says that, why can only grandmaster growers use product X? And it's because it's the most effective concentrated silica product on the market. Remember that 0.4 and 0.15% here in a second, because that's going to come back up. Grandmaster growers are dedicated to spending the time necessary to maximize crop size and yields. As you use their bigger yield system and progress up the ladder of success, you will one day become a grandmaster yourself. So it sounds really, really great. There's literally no information in this paragraph, though. And if you don't want to take the company's word for it, well, Gary from Memphis, Tennessee is a photographer. He doesn't even have to use a lens anymore because the trichomes have gotten so large from using this product that it's become irrelevant. So again, testimonials, not a great way of really evaluating a product either. So I reached out to the company. They actually got back to me within a day. And I just said I was having trouble online, finding information online. You list potassium silicate. What other ingredients are in there? And then you also have the chart that I showed before. Is it possible to get more information about this trial? They wrote back, said, thank you for the email. Here's a screenshot of the bottle. That's what I shared below. It's a proprietary form of potassium silicate. I'm not a chemist, but I believe potassium silicate is just one chemical formation there. And in regards to the study, it's riddled with confidential information. They may have a white paper in the works. It's been a year. I haven't seen a white paper. And I wrote back actually right after this and never got a response moving forward. But I wanted to dig a little further. So I went to the California, the CDFA website. And when you go there, you can see that it is a registered product. It's not an organic input material, so it's not approved for organic production. And they have the same 0.4% there and no detected heavy metals, which is interesting because then when I went to the WSDA website, they do list heavy metal content, which is important for those of you that are in states that's testing heavy metals. It's good to know what levels you're getting from the different products that you're using. And 0.4% soluble potash. So that matches up as well. So next, I went to the organic, the ODA website, and you can see that some of these companies, and this is all available online, some of these major companies actually have fertilizer civil penalties for various reasons. And when you look up these different numbers, a lot of them are for mislabeling or adulterated labels or things that weren't on the label that were supposed to be. So you can start to do a little bit of research about some of the companies, and all of this is freely available on the ODA website. And then when we go to the WSDA website, again, you can see the information more clearly as to what is actually in that product, at least based on what they submitted. And unfortunately, this product is not, this issue is not limited to strictly fertilizers, and I'll touch on that here in a second, but I did want to show one more fertilizer really quick. You can see what's in the product. You can see the suggested retail. For those of you that are familiar, all of these ingredients are quite inexpensive and certainly not worth $111 a gallon. It's a 0, 18, 16, so we know the phosphate and potash levels in there, but we don't know much more about the product. Sorry, these slides got out of order and I missed it. But essentially, going back to that potassium silicate product, you know, that claimed it was the most concentrated silica product on the market, you can see here that if you were to pick up the Eggcell 16H, which is a dry powder, you're getting much higher levels of potassium silicate. You can mix your own. A pound will mix up to approximately a gallon. So you're getting more product for less money at a higher concentration. I think the concentration puts you closer to 3% silicon dioxide compared to what you're getting out of the product X that I listed before. So going back to that Bloom product, you can see that they actually got in trouble with the ODA for being mislabeled. The lab analysis showed that even though they guaranteed 18 and 16%, they were below 1% in actual nutrient content. Based on the sampling that the Oregon Department of Ag did. So not only do you have to look at the label, but you have to realize that the testing on the label may not match what is actually listed. So it just requires you to dig a little bit deeper. And this is all before I would ever consider even trying a product out. And unfortunately, this issue is not limited to fertilizers. It's also an issue with microbial-based products. In fact, it's probably a bigger issue because some of these products sit on the shelf for a long time, which can degrade the quality of the product. And then a lot of them will vary quite a bit from what they've actually registered the product as. And again, all of this is available on the Oregon Department of Agriculture website. You can go on there and see the testing that they've done and then reach out to the companies to find out more information. And this product, Guardian Mite Spray, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this was out, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe even longer. I got a bunch of samples shipped to my garden center, and I had a lot of friends that were telling me how wonderful this product was because it was literally just destroying the mite issues that they were dealing with. Kills mites on contact, and it worked really, really well. Claims to be 100% natural. This is the ingredients they listed. What they didn't tell you was that they were actually using abamectin in the product, which is not approved for use on edible crops. And they got in a lot of trouble. I think the owner of the company went to jail for a few months. Certainly not the penalties that were commensurate with the amount of damage he did in the cannabis industry, because a lot of people lost their crops or sent out crops to medical patients that were contaminated. So another thing to be aware of is not to trust the label and not to assume that what's in the product is actually in the product. So assuming you make it through all of those steps and you decide it's something that you want to actually use in your garden, it's really important that we narrow down and use the scientific method to determine the efficacy of a product in your garden. If you add 10 products into your grow at any given time, you don't know if it's product A or product D that's making any difference. One may be helping, one may be hurting. You really have to look at one product or one variable in your garden at a given time. So that starts with making an observation, formulating a hypothesis. If I use this product or I make this change, and it could be something as simple as, changing the PPFD of your lighting, changing your lighting, changing your MBAR with your watering. All of these things would be considered a variable. You're going to make that hypothesis. You're going to design and perform an experiment. If it is a product, you want to use a third-party lab to test it. If you have the ability to do so, I realize that's not a realistic step for some of the smaller facilities or smaller home gardeners. You just can't afford to send off every product that you're using to get testing. So trusting the company that you're working with is really important. But then once you've set up your experiment, you want to collect the data and then make a determination based on how that goes. And if it goes well or poorly, you want to repeat that result and see if it matches up again. And then that allows you to make an effective determination as to whether this variable had a positive or negative effect on your garden. And digging further into this, when people talk to me about how a certain product made a big difference in the health of their plants, I try and look at that product and figure out what it was that was lacking in your garden, what the limiting factor of growth was, and then really trying to figure out what's in that product that's addressing that. So if, for example, they use a product that's high in potassium and it's based off of, it's derived from potassium sulfate, then I'll go back and say, okay, well, maybe I don't need this product. Maybe I could just use potassium sulfate at the similar levels to what this product's using and save myself, 800% off the cost of a bottled nutrient. So this is sort of the process I like to go through when I'm evaluating a product. And we've done this in commercial facilities now, and we have the data and the research available on our website, talking you through all the methodologies, the hypothesis, all of the graphs showing the results. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of those. I worked with Dr. Ben Higgins in doing this, and this one was comparing the bulk weight of these using blue mats, which is an irrigation system, versus the staff hand watering. So the owner of the facility was trying to determine, is it worth investing in an irrigation system? What's that going to do to our yields? How's that going to affect, our terpene expression, our THC levels, relative to our baseline, which in this case was hand watering. So they were able to do that. In one case with mimosa, they had a negative correlation, but everything else responded really, really well. So this told the owner of the facility that it was well worth the cost of installing this, and they actually were able to raise their yields quite considerably while reducing their labor. We did the same thing with a microbial product there. I went in with a hypothesis that we would not see a significant increase in yield using this product. In this case, it's Mammoth P. It's a combination of 4 or 5 different bacteria that all have P solubilizing effects. My hypothesis was that because of the amount of biodiversity and microbial activity already in their soils, that they would see a rather nominal effect. However, there was a statistically significant yield increase, and they were able to repeat this over time. And we share these results as well for people who want to see it in the soil. So it told them that, hey, this product may cost X amount of dollars, but we're going to see this amount in increase in yield to make it worth it to add it to our facility on scale. So this is a great way to test the product out in your facility yourself. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about today. I do host a podcast called Cannabis Cultivation and Science, where we try to cover a lot of these topics, as well as interviews with some of the top experts in a given field. I've been fortunate to have a former employee of BIOS on here, Rebecca, talking about lighting. Really, I wanted to share this talk as a way to get conversation going about how we make sound production decisions when evaluating products or evaluating changes in our facility, so that we're conserving our dollars and making smart decisions. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. And I'll let Savannah take over from here.
Thanks, Tad. So actually, kind of a funny question, I think, was how often are you not disappointed in the results that you find when you're testing?
That's a great question. Honestly, it's gotten a lot better. I think as an industry, we've gotten a lot smarter, and I'm seeing more and more people asking the right questions. And it used to be where there was just no information around cannabis research for people, and that's really changed. So it's getting better. But when I go to trade shows, I'm still amazed how many products I see that I just, I kind of have to shake my head at. And honestly, I'm seeing more and more around pesticides, because it's really easy to use that minimal harm law, where you can use approved inputs like citric acid or cinnamon oil or things like that allow you to get around some of the EPA registration requirements, but they don't have any efficacy on their product other than say it kills mites. So that's where I see more so than the fertilizer industry now, it being a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Are there any differences that you let slide? Like, because I imagine that there's a level of difference between batches, like a tolerance or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, as a soil manufacturer, this is something that I come up against all the time, because there is going to be variability. But I like to know a range of what to expect in terms of nutrient levels, and obviously that to be as tight as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we're constantly testing our soils, getting tests back from customers, and then also looking at heavy metals. That's another thing that I think is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good question. I think you have to sort of figure out what that tolerance is for you, and realize, if we're talking about a chemical formulation, in terms of chemical nutrients, I think that's a much tighter window than or a higher standard than I would expect out of an organic product.
Mm-hmm. How often do you think you see heavy metals in products, like percentage wise?
Well, if you're registering your product as a fertilizer, it's a requirement by a state that you register and have testing around heavy metals. However, especially on the soil side, we're finding a lot of people are skirting that by not registering their products as fertilizers and registering them as soil amendments or adjuvants, so they don't have to come under the same level of testing. So that gets a little tricky, but any organic soil and many organic products will have some level of heavy metals in them. It's just a matter of managing them at a level that's going to be appropriate for your garden. And that's a challenge in some of the states based on the laws that they currently have. So it's something we're constantly, battling and working on.
Wow.
So, yeah, but there's definite culprits that we're finding too, where it's more common to find heavy metals in certain products and others. In fact, I just heard of from a lab, and I'm still waiting to get the data around pH down having high levels of lead, I think they said, and that kind of surprised me. So you really have to look at all your inputs when we're talking about heavy metals. It's one of the trickier things that we're dealing with right now as an industry.
Right. Well, I think, somebody asked, have you happened to look into rice hulls? Have you found arsenic in rice hulls?
You know, I don't use rice hulls in my mixes. I haven't done a lot of testing on them. I know rice is notoriously high for arsenic. Like I have a baby girl and we were told not to feed a lot of rice-based products because of the arsenic levels. And they're seeing that in the baby foods. I don't know enough about it. My issue with rice hulls is that they break down too quickly for me to really use them as an aeration amendment anyway. I recommend keeping them under 5% of your aeration component, just as a general rule. Yeah. Okay. I am seeing some questions on here.
Yeah, in the Q&A, there's a few questions as well, if you wanted to click on that and get through those as well.
Sure. I see this first question from Sean. It might be a better question for one of you guys regarding the scientific correlation between setting lights to mimic the natural world, using a sunrise and sunset frequency. Do either of you want to touch on that? I can speak a little bit to it, but you're the lighting company. I didn't know you wanted to answer that one at all.
I don't see that question.
Savannah, if you look at the bottom row, there's Q&A.
That's what, yes, okay. All right, I was in the chat section. Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
Did you want me to touch on that or?
Yeah, go ahead and touch on that. Robert would be a better person on our end.
Okay, so for me, the thing I look at there is that it's a matter of reducing the big changes in humidity and temperature as you're switching your lights on and off. That's the thing that we try to avoid is in terms of the plants themselves. So, I don't know that I've seen any research to show that, that the slowly lowering your lights to more mimic nature to have a real big effect. But I have seen where shutting your lights off quickly can cause a huge spike in humidity, and that can be an issue. So we try to lower our lights a little bit slower in terms of timing them coming on and off in facilities for that reason. But I will say a lot of it comes down to your daily light integral in terms of the amount of light that a plant can take in a given day. And that would relate to your question a little bit, but I don't know if you guys had anything to add or.
Yeah, no, I think we could get that over to Robert as well. And he can really nail down that question because I know he'll have his opinion on that one.
Yeah, I can definitely touch on the next two. John had a question here. Can you touch on any mycorrhizal inoculants that may not really contain viable spores that are alive? And some of these products contain trichoderma. How do you know what is working? Because trichoderma supposedly kills mycorrhiza, and I've heard people using trichoderma with great success. Great questions. This is something I've been learning about a lot lately. I have an upcoming podcast. I believe it's my next one even, where I interview an Israeli scientist literally talking just about this topic. So he's going to state these things in better than I will. But to answer them quickly, you can't really tell. You have to actually stain a plant to see if it's formed a mycorrhizal infection when we're talking about endomycorrhizal fungus, which would relate to cannabis, vegetables, fruit trees, most of the plants that we want to use mycorrhiza with. They can list spores or propagules, which are little pieces or fragments of the fungi. So the labeling is really confusing regarding mycorrhizal inoculants. So that is another challenge. And then lastly, trichoderma. Now, I was under the impression that trichoderma killed mycorrhizal fungus or inhibited mycorrhizal infection as well, along with high phosphorus. That's the other thing that's been shown. However, from talking to a variety of scientists, it sounds like it's really species determinate. So some Trichoderma species actually work in symbiotic effect with mycorrhizal fungus, according to these soil scientists I've talked to. But it's really species determinant, because one of the things I've always wondered was, you see these products that'll have like 10 million spores of, Trichoderma, and then like 100 propagules per gram of Glomus interradices or Rhizophagus irregularis, which is the mycorrhizal species that we want with cannabis and with fruit trees. So I was always figured it was the Trichoderma that was having the effect because of that huge difference in concentration. So stay tuned. I'll have more information in that podcast. I see John's other question. I'm just going to touch on this. So I believe the Root Shield product is actually a T22. I could be wrong. According to Chris Hayes with BioWorks, he claims that those actually work quite well in conjunction with mycorrhizal fungus. He can probably get you that research. If you can't get a hold of him, I could get you his email information. But I haven't looked specifically into those products in relation to the effects they have, other than I really like the company and I trust the company a lot. I would want to do further research if I was going to start purchasing and using it on scale. I see Sean's question here. What do you think about wholesale companies like Kelp for Less, who sell their own labeled products, which are likely bulk from another supplier? You're absolutely right, Sean. That's what we do at KiS too. None of us are manufacturing kelp meal. None of us are manufacturing fish meal. We're all sourcing them primarily from the same places. Whether or not they want to put, their brand on it is just a personal choice. But you're totally right. Most of these are coming from the same places, and they're just buying in bulk. So at that point, you just want to verify what the product is and then find the best price for what you're looking for. I will say, I do see variability. I mean, kelp meal is pretty straightforward, but when we talk about certain products like biochar, for example, there's a huge variability in quality. And so it's really important that you do your research there. And I have seen varying arsenic levels in kelp meal based on manufacturer, whether it's Acadian or Tidal. There's only a few major producers of North Atlantic sea kelp. So it is something to look at when you're going through all this.
And I got a little more info on that question from Sean earlier from Robert. He got back to me, our VP of Biological Research and Technology. He basically said that sunrise and sunset times drive the seasonal effects, such as fruiting and flowering, but there's no data exists that the spectrum is associated with those times.
Great.
I believe Bruce Bugby at Utah State University has some research on that, actually.
Cool. I see one other question here about Yucca extract. Kills fungi. I was curious if Yucca kills Bavaria bassiana. I haven't seen any research on that. I could reach out to Suzanne. She would probably be the one that would know the answer to that. If you're not following Suzanne Wainwright Evans, she also goes on Instagram as Bug Lady Suzanne. She's really the best resource when it comes to entomology or any question relating to any of these, quote unquote microbial or biostimulant products. If she doesn't know the answer, she knows the people in the industry that do. So she's an awesome resource for people out there that I like to utilize all the time.
That's great. And see, somebody said something about the DLC, which is the Design Lights Consortium, which is the certifying body for lighting, a third-party certification that a lot of companies are using. And oftentimes people are aware of that and they're scrutinizing their lighting companies and making sure all these specs match. And maybe I think Tad's point is to bring that same level of scrutiny to the chemicals and products that you're adding to your crop. Which is brilliant.
Yeah, third-party certification is great. I think it's really important. We're seeing it on the organic certification side, as some of these companies are trying to get certifications going around some of these grows. Some are a lot stronger than others. So it's important to know what the certification really stands for too. Not so much in this case, but for example, I was working with a facility out of Puerto Rico, and they had one of the major, certifications that claimed they were organic, and they were using a product from Nectar of the Gods that had calcium nitrate on it, which is not organic. And so I reached out to the certification company, and they're like, well, they were trying their best and they've reduced the amount of chemical inputs that they're using. So I went ahead and gave them the certification. And to me, that really diluted the quality of that certification to where I didn't feel like it had as much value. So you kind of have to know what that certification actually stands for, what they're doing to test. Is it something where your next door farmer can, certify you, or is it something where someone actually comes out and checks your farm and they provide testing? And there's a lot that goes into certification that I had no idea about prior to, really looking into it. So you have to know what OMRI stands for, and CDFA and WSDA, and what differences there might be between the three. And frankly, there isn't a lot. But knowing what the certification stands for is really important when we're evaluating the quality of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
I think that wraps up the question and answer section.
Okay, wonderful. Maybe this would give you guys a little extra time to talk about what you have going on here with BIOS.
Actually, I was going to pass the mic to you, Tad. It's coming up on our closing time here.
We have another slide too that you want to jump to, Savannah, if you wanted to talk through. We had one of our new products as well, if you could skip to the next one.
Okay, I didn't realize I had control over the...
I can do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, thank you everybody for joining. So as you can see on the screen, we have a very exciting new product coming out called the Icarus Li2. You can see some dog ears there in the corner. It makes it very nice and tight to slide in for a slim profile and racking systems, but it can also be hung from ceilings. So it packs a punch for your PPF, and you can find our spec sheet on our website. So as well as scanning this QR code here to make it easy for you. Thank you for joining. And Tad, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just curious though, because I haven't seen this this light myself. Is this primarily for use in vertical grows then with racking systems, or do they also freestanding hang, or what's the main use of this light that you guys are finding?
So it's optimized for vertical grows, but it can also be hung. So
okay.
Either way, yeah.
Okay.
But it's really easy to slide in. You can see in the corner there.
Yeah, it has multiple mounting options, the cable suspension as well. So it makes it super easy to adjust the hanging height from where you are hanging it.
Yeah.
And I think the most exciting thing you said, like, is this rapid rack system. You're able to install this thing in seconds with just, a couple people. You don't need tools. You slide out these dog ears here and it slides into your rack. Super easy to integrate into all your racking systems. And then not to mention the power of the light, like Savannah was saying as well. It's
1700.
Yeah.
Or 1700 micromoles.
Yeah.
At 650 watts. So
cool.
It's pretty perfect for a nice 4x4. Uniformity is key. We got 8 bars there. So we just spread the light out a little bit more over the canopy so that each and every one of your plants is getting the same amount of light, which is important because you want yield on all of your plants, right? And all of the footprint of your grow operation. So I highly recommend looking into it, obviously.
I do see a question here from John for you guys. Do you have any products that not only emit a full spectrum, but anything that puts out UVA and UVB below 300 nanometers?
No, we do not. Not at this time. We don't believe that there's enough field knowledge to include that in our spectrum at this time, but we're always open to learning. And as we state, we're a scientific company. So when it becomes scientifically proven, we may consider adding it in.
Okay. Yeah, just to touch on the next question up here from Van. I just interviewed Dr. Bruce Bugbee for my podcast. And one of the things that was interesting for me to hear from him was when evaluating a light, he's a little less concerned with spectrum and more concerned with efficiency and cost per watt when evaluating a light, rather than looking at the ability to adjust spectrum or the particular spectrum of a given light, provided that we're talking about a light that's, a full spectrum white light. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm curious to see, I know he's pushing some plants now upwards of 2000 ppfd and even looking to go higher. So I'm curious to see how that changes and affects the industry too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as far as speaking to the spectrum and having a variable spectrum, there's just so many different types of plants and cultivars that varying the spectrum and varying the cultivar, there's so many different dynamics and things like that. So for it to be proven to have a benefit of altering your spectrum and knowing how that's going to affect your crop is difficult at this time with the scientific knowledge that we have.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that gets into the Sean's last question there, Savannah, if you wanted to just touch on it real quick, but he was asking, without getting too much in the product versus product, what makes BIOS a leader in lighting, and what's kind of the main selling point for our lights? What do we strive to be?
So basically we started in 2015, and I've seen the same principles in our lights since then. And I've been working for BIOS since 2016. So we've always offered a broad spectrum light to include the range of colors in the spectrum, going with what science has proven at that time. And we've always had success. So beyond that, we're consistent and scientific, as well as industrial grade. So you can look at our fixtures as far back as we started and understand that we've always built our fixtures to last. So it's kind of like a John Deere, in the lawnmower world, I guess you could say. We've always had a cover over the LEDs. They've always been cleanable, and I can go ahead and say that our customer service, we really value our clients, and we're always there at the drop of a dime. So I guess that's it in a nutshell for what sets us apart.
Yeah, and I think also, just looking for the little things that can help a grower, like this new rapid rack thing. I mean, there's just little nuances that we try to incorporate into the lights that make it easier for the grower to get to what they need to be doing, which is growing, and less worrying about the equipment.
Right. We've shaved a lot off of the installation time with this next iteration of products. So quicker mounting options all around, and greenhouses too. So.
Yeah, because there's tons of powerful lights out there, but it's what you can do above and beyond that as well. And like she said, priding ourselves in customer service and doing the little things to help the growers get to growing and not worrying about equipment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on that, for me, the reason I started working with BIOS was because from talking to friends in the industry who knew a lot more about lighting than me, your guys' name came up along with a couple others very consistently. I love that you guys are founded by a NASA scientist, just my own love for space and everything. And what they're doing, I thought was a really cool bonus. And then the big thing that the lights were washable, because a lot of the facilities you go in, they're dusty, stuff gets kicked up into the air, you're spraying. You need to be able to clean your lights if you want to maximize the quality of your light spectrum and your light intensity. So I just wanted to highlight that really quick.
One little cherry on top of that. So if your LEDs are just coated and they're not covered with glass, your LEDs are concave. So as stuff builds up on your LEDs and you go to wipe down that coating and you think you're cleaning it, you're actually just rubbing more dirt over the actual part of the diode that the light is coming out of. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about these coatings and things like that and the lights that you're looking at.
We feature all glass coating, so you don't see that problem.
So how do you clean a light then? What's the best way to do it?
Just a soft cloth and water.
Yeah,
And
with
a little-
glass, it's
Oh, I
super
can't-
easy.
Is
Yeah.
Savannah talking?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I got you, Savannah.
Okay, so I think Tad's off. Tad?
Oh. It's okay. You can go ahead and just answer that, how to clean it, and then we can.
Can
Oh, there you are,
hear?
Tad.
Hear you guys.
There you
anymore.
are.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. So did you hear the cleaning part?
You want to just repeat it again, just in case
There you
some people didn't hear.
Oh, okay. All right.
Should I?
Everything looked good on my end, so I've just been confused. So I just said just like a soft cloth and some water, and that's it. So if you have a tough spot, just maybe a little
Elbow grease.
grease. Yes. So anyway, thank you all for joining. It's been a wonderful time. I've learned a lot from Tad, and he has an exciting podcast coming up, as we heard. So make sure you give that a listen, and keep an eye out for more webinars coming from BIOS. And we hope to keep them just as good as this one. So
Yeah, and we'll be recording. This one has been recorded, so we'll be putting this up as well on YouTube, so everyone can listen in a second time. Or if you had some friends that missed it and you want to show it to them, you can pass the link along. So we'll send out an email with that link, so you guys can